We begin in South Korea, where actor Cha In-ha has been found dead at his home in South Korea's capital, Seoul, making him the third young Korean star to die in the span of 2 months. His talent agency released a statement saying it was filled with grief. The agency also urged fans not to speculate on the cause of his death. Cha had most recently been appearing in the TV series called The Love with Flaws. Cha was also a member of an acting group set up called Surprise You. He made his debut in a 2017 film called You, Deep Inside of Me. The death is the latest in a string of celebrity tragedies in South Korea.
최근에 젊고 재능 있는 연예인이 안타까운 선택을 한 것이 너무 가슴이 아프고 안타깝습니다. 그리고 아직 어린 청소년들이 그런 극단적인 선택이 어떠한 절망적인 상황에서 돌파구로 선택하는 그런 계기가 되지 않기를 바라고요.
Cha's death comes after a K-pop singer, Gu Hara, who was 28 years old, was found dead at her home last month. Her death followed the apparent suicide of a fellow K-pop star, Soo Lee, in the month of October this year. Soo Lee had spoken out against cyberbullying. Both deaths were treated as suspected suicides. Their deaths have sparked debates about the pressure felt by South Korean K-pop stars, including bullying and harassment from fans. Now, Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly, American political analyst on inter-Korean affairs, professor, Department of Political Science, Busan National University in Busan, joins us now live on the show. Talk to us. The third K-pop star has died now. Isn't it a matter of concern that young stars are taking their own lives in South Korea?
It is. This is something that actually has gotten a lot of publicity in Korea in the last few months. Actually, this goes back several years. South Korean pop stars have had these kinds of issues with loneliness and despair and melancholy and sort of drug problems and things like that. This is actually an old issue in the Korean pop music industry, in the K-pop industry. But since there have been so many, and it seems like these are related to loneliness and these, particularly with women, right? They're sort of isolated from friends and stuff. I think there's been more of a social discussion recently than in the past. But this is not the first time this kind of thing has happened.
Fair enough. It's not the first time, clearly, and it's becoming a trend. That's the concern here, Dr. Kelly. Talk to us in terms of what are the reasons cited for K-pop star Cha's death this time around?
The consensus seems to be emerging that it was mostly about harassment, that this young woman and others before her became sort of very famous very quickly, and they weren't ready for the level of sort of online commentary and sort of malign trolling and the rest about their appearance and what they eat and their sex lives and their boyfriends and their families and what their parents do and things like that, that these women are sort of in many cases sort of pulled out of high school or college and they don't really have any preparation to be celebrities, and then they're just hit with this sort of blast force of social criticism. A lot of it is sort of very cheap, right? Sort of like what color skirt they wear and how long their hair is and things like that. And it really pushes them psychologically over the edge, that they're just not ready for this. They're not used to being celebrities. Many of them are quite young, you know, they're in their early 20s, and that so these suicides frequently, the consensus seems to be that they're from despair. They're from sort of like loneliness and isolation.
All right. At this stage, it would be fair if I were to describe the culture of a K-pop industry in Korea as nothing but toxic.
there have been enough deaths and there have been enough complaints. There's been enough sort of rumor over the years about sexual harassment and drug problems and like we said, sort of loneliness and isolation. I mean, very often these women, they're not allowed to have boyfriends. They're sort of kept away from their families. I mean, they really are sort of like isolated, and they're put through these really sort of punishing training regimes, right, where they're not allowed to eat very much in order to stay exceptionally thin, and they have to work out sort of long hours, both sort of athletics and then also the dance moves. And so despite their popularity, right, and they have to go on stage and look like they love it and they're sort of excited and happy to be here. But then, afterwards in their own personal lives, they're sort of quite lonely and depressed. And so they're making a great deal of money, but they're actually quite personally unhappy. And so, yeah, I would argue that at this point there have been enough of these kinds of rumors that, yeah, it is toxic. I think that's a fair description, yes.
All right. Tell us, Dr. Kelly, is it age, trolling, or the inability of the industry to help young people to cope with the crisis that is the big issue at this point in time?
Anyone who enters the K-pop industry at this point should know what's coming, right? I mean, to a certain extent, the lifestyle regimen is pretty well known at this point, right? It's pretty well understood that despite the image of sort of like success and happiness and sort of beauty and the rest of it, that actually many of the participants in this industry feel stressed out and feel harassed and often feel lonely and stuff like that. So at this point, if you go into the industry now after all these years of rumors and suicides and drug problems and things like that, I think at this point you carry some of the blame yourself. I mean, I have a young daughter, and I would not want here in Korea, and I would not want her to enter this industry. I would strongly discourage her. So it's not just the industry anymore, because the rigors of the industry are now understood. I think the Korean government could take a little better measure on this. The Korean government could intervene a little bit more, but to be fair to the industry doesn't hide how rigorous it is. It doesn't hide the physical and emotional demands that are placed on these singers. It's pretty well known at this point.
All right, the industry doesn't hide, but aren't management agencies responsible for the health of these stars that they're contracting legally?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. But part of the rigor of the industry is that often they're actually sort of purposefully, by contract, cut off from other people. So, like, for example, like one of the things that's sort of most notorious is that these K-pop stars are often told, and contractually they're obliged not to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend because that helps to keep them more sexually desirable if they're seen as single. There's also rumors that they're sort of kept at work and on tour so often that they almost never see their family. So that's actually a great point, right? That they don't actually have the social support structure, right? They're away from their family for a long time. They're not actually allowed to sort of develop friendships or intimacy the way the rest of us do. And because they're so young, they're kind of at the mercy of the managers and the others. And so they end up falling back on each other, right? The sort of the bands rather than the individuals, right? The bands sort of become very tightly knit. And they end up relying on one another. But yeah, they are, as you said, they are basically cut off from the social support system that the rest of us sort of take for granted. And I mean, I suppose the industry would argue that, again, I don't want to be unfair to the industry. I mean, I think the industry would argue, look, these women are becoming millionaires when they're 23. And that, if they're willing to undergo these rigors, the financial rewards for it are enormous, and they don't stay in the industry very long. They only stay in the industry like 5 or 8 years before they're too old for it. And so if they can survive 5 to 8 years of this kind of punishing lifestyle, they walk away with millions of dollars.
All right, then we will have to leave it at that. Dr. Robert Edwin Kelly, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here.